Hello, friends across the globe, healthy human beings. Welcome to another episode of the Alter Your Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Benjamin Alter.
I'm your co-host, Dr. Susanna Alter.
And this is your source of information and inspiration to promote the holistic transformation of your health and the health of our planet.
That's right, it is. And today we have a great topic, and it's about stress. Again, maybe you've heard us talk about stress in past episodes.
We love stress.
We love stress, but we're talking about stress from a different angle today. Magnify symptoms and really be the underlying cause of symptoms.
Yeah, we've probably all had this connection, this insight, this experience of symptoms exacerbating when we're stressed out, or maybe just symptoms flaring up or onset. We come down with an acute illness of some sort oftentimes when we are stressed. It's very common.
Exactly. But before we dive into today's topic, I just want to briefly announce again our amazing food-based cleanse that will be starting this Monday, September 23rd. So just right around the corner. And actually, the first pre-cleanse meeting is happening tonight. But if you're listening to this recording after Thursday evening, you can still sign up. You can sign up anytime before September 23rd.
Yeah, and then if you're listening to this after September 23rd, sometime into the future, know that we do these food-based cleanses at least twice a year, and next time we'll probably invite you to join as well. It's a great opportunity to reshift and reattune your diet and your lifestyle in a way that's really supportive of your optimal health. We love to do it with the changing of the seasons, so stay tuned to the spring is probably when we'll do it next.
Exactly.
And the other thing, on the topic of announcements, just real quick, for those of you who are new and have not learned yet of our online course called Medicinal Living, it is a great way to dive into the essential foundations of lifestyle medicine, becoming your own true self-healer. So if you're a DIY kind of person and like to do it yourself without the support of a professional, we encourage you to take on the role of your own healer. That is, of course, unless you have some extreme. This course is really designed to point you in the direction of health and guide you all along the way as you master the 7 essential medicines of life.
It's a really great course. We poured everything we know about self-healing into this course.
So you can find out more about the cleanse and about the course at www.alter.health. And the course specifically is alter.health/course.
And for our podcast listeners, we give 20% off the course if you use the coupon code ALTERYOURHEALTH, all caps. So that's a pretty good deal.
Food for thought. So, anyways, 3 minutes of commercials. Now let's dive into stress.
Yes.
What do you say, Suze?
Let's do it. And this topic really came up for us this week because I had my own experience with stress and symptoms this week. And honestly, it's been a very long time since I've revisited some of these old symptoms that came up. So it really reminded me of the power that stress has on our physical health.
And let's set the stage for you guys. Susanna and I, we live our most mindful, intentional, healing lifestyle, medicinal lifestyle. We are really conscious of the food we're putting into our bodies, the air that we're breathing, the water that we're drinking. I wouldn't say that we're neurotic about these kind of things, but we just really love living our healthiest life. And we enjoy it. We enjoy life. But, we've had a lot of things kind of coming into our life. We've been traveling a little bit, taking trips, working on projects, being torn in various directions. So we've got this kind of foundational, healthy life. And then on top of that, we just have had some things to juggle. Like, I imagine we're not the only ones in this world who are juggling.
Right. And I think in particular, one of the biggest things that was kind of out of the ordinary for us was that we had a presentation at a pretty big company where we were kind of the medical experts providing information for the team at that company. And for us, it was a new setting. It was,
It was exciting.
It was exciting, but it was a totally new role for me to be taking on. So in retrospect, I look back at that and see, wow, there were a lot of insecure thoughts streaming through my head. Like, am I qualified? Am I going to be, what if they don't take me seriously? Blah, 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 blah. So,
blah, blah, blah.
Blah, blah, blah. So, for those of you out there who are kind of new to me and Ben and my story, I have a history of chronic illness, chronic gastrointestinal issues, chronic joint pain, chronic fatigue, anxiety, skin issues, things like that.
I don't have any issues. I'm perfect.
Right. But certainly for a couple of years in my life, was really wrapped up in this chronic illness. And I'm so happy to say now that I am completely healthy, actually feeling even better now than I did before I was sick. And I attribute all of that to the healthy lifestyle that I'm living. But,
and the healthy thoughts that you're thinking.
And the healthy thoughts and relationship I have with thoughts. However,
I thought you were going to say relationship you have with me.
That's a work in progress. Ha ha ha. Just kidding. Kind of. So anyway, moving on to what was I going to say? Oh yeah, I was going to say that every now and then I still have little symptoms that pop up every now and then. And the first one that tends to pop up is a little bit of gas in my digestive system.
I sense that once. I am the second to know.
Yes. So, of course, the first place my mind goes, and I think many of you out there can probably relate to this, is what did I eat? What am I doing differently? There must be something outside of myself that's causing this symptom, right?
Yeah, it's got to be, that meal last night, or maybe that that cookie the day before, or that glass of
what cookie?
That glass of kombucha from 2 nights ago.
Right, exactly. The mind goes there. But the truth is, this week especially, nothing had changed.
And
in my lifestyle.
Sometimes it is good to take inventory of those potential physical causes of our physical symptoms.
Mm-hmm. It's true because sometimes there is a physical, aggravation. But for me, in that example, in this situation, nothing had changed in my lifestyle. So I was pretty sure that it was the stress. What also came up that was really interesting was joint pain, because I really hadn't experienced much joint pain in a really long time. And that was probably the 5th day of being stressed when I noticed the joint pain. And I think that was a cumulative effect of just having inflammation in my digestive system. And
just to pause real quick, Susanna, as like you didn't know this in the moment.
No.
We're
reflecting back.
We're doing a reflection exercise. So Susanna wasn't like, oh, I've got a little gas and bloating, I'm stressed, I know that's why. This is something, when we're wrapped up in life, when we're wrapped up in our symptoms and our experience, it's really hard to see clearly and understand exactly what is at the root cause. And that's why, a trained holistic medical professional be at the root of the situation while someone's in the midst of it, while someone's in the thick of it. But after the flare, after the wave of symptoms, we have some clarity and we can look back and reflect.
Well, and I will say, I will correct you, Ben. Certainly in the first couple of days, I was wrapped up in what's causing this gas. But I will say by the 3rd or 4th day, I was clued into, oh yeah, this is how my body responds.
Right. It took, stress. It wasn't like, oh, I've got a little gas, I'm stressed out, this is what's going on. Yeah, it took some time because and it probably does for most anyone.
Yeah. But that's like one of the biggest points that I want to bring up in this episode is just how sneaky stress can be. Because honestly, I think from the role of being a doctor, oftentimes we ask our patients and clients, how do you feel your stress level
All the
is?
time.
All the time we do. And many times we get a response that's like, oh, maybe two
Yeah.
or three out of 10, it's pretty low. Um, and sometimes we do get people who know, like, oh, there's a lot of stress in my life. But I'd say more often than not, we get a response that's like, oh, no, I manage my stress really well and it's pretty
Yeah,
low.
I
And
feel like there are definitely two categories of people. There's the people who might tend to deny the amount of stress that they have in their life and just be on the positive, just thinking positive thoughts and try to float past that. What meanwhile it's there and it's a real experience. And then there's the people who really claim to operate very well with stress despite the symptoms that they're experiencing.
mhm.
Oh yeah, my stress is really high. I'm fine.
But really commonly, I think people feel like they handle their stress well. And I'm not saying that they're not handling their stress well. What I'm saying is that I think that there can be a certain amount of unconscious stress for a lot of people. And for me, in my experience last week, my stress was very much unconscious to some degree. I knew that I had this presentation coming up, and I was telling myself, like, all right, we got this. Oh, yeah. Like, we know all this stuff. But meanwhile, when I reflect back, there certainly were doubts in my unconscious. I mean, there was, and those came out, of course, during the presentation when I got all nervous right before the presentation. Um, but a lot of times our mind is, really efficient at kind of tricking ourselves into um, thinking that we're not really as stressed as maybe we are unconsciously.
I would agree.
Yeah. So I want to bring this up because we see in our practice that one of the main causes that is underlying a lot of symptoms, or at least a contributing factor, is stress.
Oh, are you serious, Suze? It is the central point of every symptom that any human being ever experiences throughout their life in any lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
It is it. And obviously the exceptions to that are acute traumas. But even then, I shared before when I thought I broke my hand and I was stressed out and oh my gosh, what the heck did I do? What's wrong with me? I can't believe I did this. It hurts so bad. And then after a couple hours of that wave of stress in that acute response, my body started to heal exponentially when I started to have a deeper understanding while my stress kind of subsided.
Yeah.
So yeah, stress is the most important thing that we can talk about. And that being said, it's formless. Stress is formless. We can't point it, measure it, weigh it. Well, we can kind of measure it physiologically, but in terms of our connection and relationship with it, it's not like food, it's not like water or air, it's not like any other determinant of health where we can really control and see and feel and experience. Stress is something formless, and the relationship with that formlessness is very unique, individual to individual. And that makes it challenging to talk about, to point to, and speak about something that's invisible and formless. So, really, when we have these kind of conversations, our intention is to point in the direction and look in a direction, and also, encourage a feeling, because stress is a feeling, and the antidote to stress is also a feeling. And So just having that understanding of what stress is, and having a knowing that stress is actually And stress and the stress response are adaptive mechanisms that the human body is designed to use in order to navigate, to thrive, and to survive. So stress is not something that we deny and shove under the rug. Stress is something that we use to course correct and guide us along our life and along our healing journey. That's really how we relate to stress. And therefore, our our intention personally and professionally in our clinic working with people is to support people in lowering their tolerance to stress so that they become more sensitive to the stress. Like in your experience, Susanna, where you had this unconscious, really low grade wave of stress, maybe next week or next presentation, you feel that and you're able to respond and course correct a little bit more with more agility and more resilience.
Exactly.
So and that's kind of a totally backwards approach to dealing with stress than our society has. Our society just shares all these stress management tools so that we can manage more stress, and then you can, like, somehow keep your head above water as your stress is building. But really, we relate with stress in a totally different way. And I think it's much more sustainable and lends itself much more so to holistic health and healing and well-being rather than just struggle.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of people could have heard my story in the beginning of this podcast episode and said, like, oh, oh yeah, I relate to that, and I know that stress contributes to some of my symptoms. So how do I lessen that stress? How do I get rid of that stress? That's usually where our mind goes. Like, how do I antidote that stress? And from our perspective, that's not what we're going for. We're not going for antidoting stress because we recognize that some amount of stress is just part of the human experience. And we don't have control over the stressful thoughts that come into our head. However, we do have control within our relationship with stress, those stressful thoughts. And so, what was interesting for me in my experience last week was that, like I said, in the first 3 days or so, when I was kind of unconscious of the stress, but experiencing these symptoms, I had a lot of thoughts, additional stressful thoughts, like, what's causing this gas? Oh my gosh, is there actually something wrong with my digestive system that, am I regressing into the disease?
Is it the vegan diet?
Oh no, it must be my vegan diet.
It must be this plant-based diet.
That thought actually never crossed my mind.
Good.
But then midweek, when I was like, oh, this is stress, and I woke up to that, and I did kind of lower my tolerance to stress. I was feeling the stress more than in my body, and I didn't freak out or try to minimize that stress at all. I just acknowledged it, really. And I remembered, like, oh, yeah, I guess this is how my body responds to stress. And I know the stress isn't going to stay here forever. Like all thoughts are impermanent. So I know that it's going to move through me. And then further on in that week, when I started having that joint pain, instead of, again, like, freaking out, oh my gosh, I haven't had joint pain in so long, what does this mean? This must mean that I'm regressing into my chronic illness, blah 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 blah. Rather than going down that rabbit hole, I was just present in the knowing that, okay, like, again, I'm experiencing some stress right now, and it's not going to stay forever.
And what I hear you saying, Susanna, is you had the insight and the remembrance that stress is actually it's not something outside of yourself, it's something inside of yourself. Stress is the quality of your thinking in any moment. It's not the actual outer experience, it's the quality of the thinking. And when we understand that stressful thoughts are just like any other thought in their formlessness, then we can have more of a detached, neutral nature, maybe at some point, after the thought storm or tornado subsides, we or even in the eye of the storm, we have a glimmer of insight of, oh, this is just actually some ridiculous, formless, stressful thought. And yeah, it's stressing me out, but it's still just a thought. And it really doesn't, it's impermanent, it's formless, it's going to pass. And it's all good.
Yeah. And
And as we were talking about earlier today, that understanding just kind of takes the edge off.
exactly.
It doesn't change the actual experience in the moment, or maybe it doesn't have to necessarily change the experience in the moment, but it takes the edge off of the experience so that there's a little bit more grace to unravel and find a new path in the dark.
Right. Right. And also talking about stress. I think a lot of us talk about it in terms of, oh, last week was so stressful. Like I even said that in this podcast episode. Last week was stressful. But when I actually look at last week, I wasn't stressed out every single second of
Yeah.
every minute of every day of last week.
Our minds are really good at going back and grabbing onto all the junk. It's like our mind is a junk magnet sometimes.
Right, but the reality is that our moods and our thoughts change moment to moment. So, yeah, I can look back and reflect on last week as stressful, but really, throughout the day there were probably stressful moments that came up and then disappeared and then again came up and then disappeared and then came up and disappeared. And that's the nature of all thought and all feelings and in all life,
Yeah.
all throughout life.
Yeah, well, were we going to talk about briefly, like really briefly, like, how stress actually magnifies symptoms, or are we just going to talk about stress?
Well, I'll just say briefly.
Yeah, because you shared a great experience of how stress had magnified your symptoms, and I think maybe we don't have to say anything more about how stress magnifies symptoms. We just know, it's the nervous system, it's our physiology, and it is designed once again to course correct us and to point us back into the center of the lane so that we're not at risk of running off the road and having a heart attack, or having like getting diabetes, or like or diving into any chronic state of any sort. So the stress is to guide us.
Yeah, it's our rumble strip, as Ben says.
I like to say I like that. It
I
helps
like
me
that analogy
because
too.
I drive a lot and I hit the rumble strip every once in a while. And when I do, I don't beat myself up for running over the rumble strip. I'm like, oh my gosh, Ben, I can't believe you ran over the rumble strip again. I'm like, oh, okay, like that was close. And same is not necessarily true for me in my experience with stress. When I run in over the rumble strip with my stress internally, sometimes I do beat myself up. Sometimes I do judge myself for being stressed and think like, oh, I should be able to tolerate this better. But that's where I'm at with my learning, which, in sharing with it, it's kind of ridiculous. It's kind of ridiculous. So having some insight to the ridiculousness of our thinking and judgments that we can have on ourselves can be helpful to get out of that sort of pattern.
Yeah, and also to remember that we're human beings, and again, we don't have control over all those stressful thoughts that come into our head.
Did you want to wrap up with something? You were kind of doing that, and then I went into a rumble strip.
No, I was just going to say as briefly as I could how stress aggravates symptoms, but I don't think we really need to.
We don't need to. It all comes down to
your... talked about that in so many other episodes.
And you guys know in your bodies, and you feel in your bodies the distinction between your sympathetic nervous system and your parasympathetic nervous system. I trust if you're listening to this and you're tuned in and your feet are on the ground and you're breathing, I trust that you have some connection with your parasympathetic nervous system. And that's where we want to live more and more of the time. That's our intention, especially when we have a tendency not to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so wrapping things up on the topic of stress, hopefully you guys are feeling grounded, peaceful, at ease, maybe more in control. And I put control in quotation marks because the only thing that we are in control of is our relationship to our thoughts. We're not in control of our thoughts. We can't control stress, quote unquote. We can only control how we relate with stress moment to moment. We're certainly not going to control the traffic or the weather or what happens in a relationship necessarily, or what happens in any other outer circumstance outside of our inner reality. So controlling our relationship with stress is really what we have an opportunity to learn and to master.
And sometimes we're not going to be in control of our relationship with stress either.
And it is not the learning curve of that relationship is not linear. It is so wild and crazy, up and down, human experience, roller coaster status.
Yeah.
It's not even funny. But, maybe having some understanding once again takes the edges off, so that it's like, oh, I can ride this one.
Yeah.
I can surf this one. I got this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Have fun on that roller coaster.
Yeah. And anyways, wrapping things up, just a reminder, if it's your first time tuning in, thanks for joining us. Thanks for riding this one through to the end. If you would be so kind, we'd appreciate if you subscribe and rate and review the podcast, or tune into the YouTube video of it if you are more visually oriented. And we are live on Facebook and Instagram Thursdays at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. So if you want to join us live, we'd love to have you. And thanks for our live audience on Instagram and Facebook today. And that being said, just a reminder of our fall cleanse that starts on Monday. Our first meeting is actually this evening. If you don't make it, it's all right, but we'd love to have you starting Monday. That's when we dive into this hyper nourishing, whole food, plant-based cleanse. And the intention of it is not to be some extreme thing that we bounce in and out of, but use it as a way to direct us and orient us into a sustainably healthy life. We like to do this cleanse twice a year at the change of seasons, autumn and spring. So if you missed this one, we hope to see you next time. Mm-hmm. And that's all we got for you today.
Thanks for joining us.
We'll see you guys next time. Peace and love.
Bye for now. And for